Hey, welcome back to the channel. In this episode, we're going to start putting the rear end in. So we've got the leaf springs over here on the table. We're going to put the new bushings in, the Caltrack bushings, the new tie bolts or the pins where the rear end sits at. I actually took the overload leaf out. So let's go over here to the press. I'll get everything knocked out and then we'll start hanging the leaf springs, putting the rear end in, running brake lines. That's what mainly this video is going to be about, is getting the brake lines run from one side to the other. Then we'll get it painted and final install. So stick around. So the first thing we got to do is get the new tie bolts put in. So let's get that done. Okay, we got the bushings, the Caltrack bushings put in. Now we're gonna hang the leaf spring hangers, put the bolts back in, get everything hung back on the frame so we can put the rear end in and get our brake lines mocked up that we've got. Don't forget, one thing I want to tell you, if you get this far and you got your gas tank out, don't forget to turn your bolt. The bolt is typically, it's in the frame this way. And if the tank is in, when you try to drive the bolt out, it runs into the gas tank. So you need to flip it around to where your nut is going to be on the inside. So let me get you set up. We'll start getting all this mocked up, get our rear end set down in, the U-bolts on. And I'm not going to put the Caltracks on right now until we get ready for the final assembly, when I get all this painted and I get my brake lines and everything put on. So when we get this, we get our leaf springs underneath the truck, get the shackles hung, get all the bolts stuck in just to mock it up. We'll come back later and I'll do close-ups of what all I did to the rear end to get the brake lines on. So let's get it started, get everything under there so we can get the rear end in. So stick around, guys. Now that we have the rear end just sitting in here, this will give me a good idea. I'm going to go ahead and bolt up my calipers. Then I can see how my hard lines are going to be across the back. And I'm going to put these brackets on each side of the back brace here, along with my brake fittings. Oop, wrong way. My brake fittings on each side like that, and we can see how much hose we've got to have to go out to the brake calipers. And then once we get all these welded on and the brake lines bent and secured, we can get this thing painted and permanently mounted. So let's get down here and I'll get you some angles and some shots of what I'm doing. I'm going to put the new rubber hose on here. We're going to let it droop down and see what we got to have on this other side to make these brake lines and all work out. So let me get you down in the floor where you can see what's going on, and I'll show you, and it'll make more sense to you when you can see this brake line over here. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change this brake fitting right here, or this brake hose. And if you've never changed one of these before, you're going to need a 9/16 line wrench, which looks like this, and you're going to need a regular 5/8 will work. Make sure you use your line wrench on the top here. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna get this line off, and I don't have the keeper on here. If yours is still in the frame, you can use your keeper to hold it. It'll hold it up there, so you can just use the line wrench, but we're gonna use this to see if we can break this loose. And there we go. Okay, that will get your old one off, your old brake hose off. This one, I'm sure, is the factory one that came in 1992, so we're going to get our new one on there so we can measure. So we can measure down here and see how long each hard line has to be to each side. So I'm not going to show you putting this one back on. We're going to get down to the meat and potatoes of what you really want to see is how long do these hard lines have to be, how am I going to cut and flare them, and how am I going to make my brackets to hold my new line. So let's get started on that. Okay, now that we've got this hose on, I'm going to try to figure out where I want to locate the bracket to hold this, because on the old style, you remember your factory has a bracket that comes off the diff cover, which this being a 9-inch, the diff cover's not in the same place as a Chevrolet. But I'm thinking I'm going to mount it right here, and then I'm going to take this brake fitting assembly that I've made, and I'm going to weld it down here. I'm going to trim some of it off where this will be a little lower, and then I'll run my brake lines from this to here, and then from here all the way across to the other side. And what we will do is we'll do this on each side. We'll put one of these on each side. And it looks like there's about 9 inches here, so I'm gonna order, Russell makes a 9-inch hose. I don't have it yet, but by the time I make this video, I'll probably have it done. So I'm gonna set you up and I'll show you how I make the bracket for this piece. Then we're gonna get this trimmed off about a 1/2 inch, then we'll weld it to right here. So we'll have somewhere to put tie our brake lines into. Then we'll bend the lines, cut what we need, get them made up, and this will be done. And we can paint this and get ready for final assembly. So stay tuned. Okay guys, I cut these off about a 1/2 inch. I'm going to weld them over here so my brake fittings can fit. We'll do both sides. Then we'll get our bracket made for the supply hose, supply line, and we'll start bending our brake lines. So that's what's next. Okay, we got everything mocked up. I'm thinking I may put a longer brake line here and put a loop in it, because I really don't like these sharp bends. They're not really that bad, but I may put a longer brake line here. I'm not sure yet. But we've got all the brackets mocked up. The brake lines are mocked up. So now it's time I'm gonna put a few more welds here to hold this a lot more secure. It's just tacked. But it's time to take all this back off, clean the rear end one more time, and get it painted. So while the paint is drying, we'll dig out the axles, get the studs put in, get the bearings put on, and get those ready to put in, as well as get the third member ready to put in. So I'm gonna take this off, paint it, put the axle bearings on, put the axle studs in, then we'll get this thing assembled and put in the truck for the last time, I hope. Stay tuned, guys. Okay guys, we got the rear end painted. Next step is we're going to put the bearings and the wedding ring on the axles, get the studs put in. I got the press out here. It's a beautiful day. I got the shop door open, so we're going to get these pressed on, get the studs put in, then we're going to get the rear end put on the truck finally. So here we go. Okay, now that we've got our bearings and our wedding ring on here, man, those wedding rings give me a fit. Those were tight. But now that we got those installed, my vise has a pipe vise, and I've clamped it around the axle. And according to Strange, I have got the 1026 3-inch stud kit. So as you can see, 1026 3-inch, we're going to torque it to 90 foot-pounds. We're going to use red Loctite. So I'm going to clean this up with brake clean. Clean these threads up with brake clean. Clean the bolts up with brake clean. They've been doused with oil so that the red Loctite will stick. We're going to put these in here. Take our trusty torque wrench and torque these to 90 foot-pounds. So here we go. Okay guys, we are on the downhill slide. We're finally getting to put the rear end in. So as you can see, I've got jack stands on the outside because I wanted to get the rear end setting over the leaf springs before I put this in. I didn't want to put this in laying down on the floor. I wanted to, when I put my silicone around it, I want the weight of it pushing down. Plus, as you can see, I wanted to test fit before I put any silicone around it. And I'll shine a light here. You can see some of these bolts are kind of touching. Some of them are in the center of the holes, but some of them are holding the rear end off from falling on down onto the housing. So my plan is to take these out, mark them wherever they need to be adjusted a little. I'm gonna put my nuts on here, put some nuts on here and tap them one way or the other and see if I can make them move to the center of the hole where when I pick this thing up and set it down, it will just drop down on here. So I'm gonna cut you off and get that done, and then I'll show you what I was trying to accomplish when we cut you back on. Okay, that is much better. So basically what I did is with it setting, when it wouldn't set flush on all the studs, I marked which way the studs had to move. You can see my arrow. It'd be better if I zoom in. You can see my arrow pointing which way that stud had to move. This one had to go in just a little. This one actually, if we zoom in, it had to come out just a little, and then that one had to come out diagonally, but I got them all center of the hole. And when I did that, now my center section set right down on here flush. So when I put my silicone and my gasket on, I don't have to worry about fighting with it and getting stuff everywhere, silicone. I did order a Lowe blocker gasket from Alex at Trick Chassis, but I'm actually going to go with this Felpro, this 55074 Felpro gasket. I will silicone both sides. I'm just going to use some Permatex oil resistant, part number 75190. I'm going to put a thin coat on both sides, drop this in, and then we will get it filled up with gear dope. I am going to use Lucas 80-90 weight gear oil, and I ordered that from Amazon as well. It was cheaper by the gallon than it was to buy it at the parts store. It was like $20 a quart at the parts store, and it was $35 a gallon from Amazon. And here's my center section. Actually, although I ordered the rear end from Trick Chassis, the center section actually was shipped to me by Quick Performance, and here's the break-in recommendation on gear oil and the break-in sequence if you guys like to see it. 80 to 90 weight gear oil, non-synthetic, GL5, no positive adders. Initial break-in, fill it with oil, drive it gently for 15 minutes, no aggressive. Let it rest for 30 to 45 and repeat steps 2 and 3 4 more times, and that will get the center section broke in. But we'll put the gear oil in it last. We'll get this thing back up on the wheels, get this installed. I wanted to do it again on the jack stands so that the weight of this would be easier to pick up and set down flush than it would be if this thing was turned 90 degrees from here and put it back on there. So I'm going to set you up. I'm going to put my silicone and my gasket on, put this on, put the nuts on here. They torque to 35 foot-pounds. We'll get those torqued, and then we will get the rear end installed for the final time, get the brake lines on, and we'll finish out this video. Thanks for sticking with me this long, guys, and if you want to see the rest and the brake lines installed, keep hanging around and we're going to get it done. Okay, guys, the third member is installed. I did this rear end was actually the third member actually had perfect size for 5/16 washers, so I put some in there. Torqued all the bolts to 35 foot-pounds, so we're ready to put the rear end in. So stay tuned. We're gonna flip the rear end over. We're gonna let this dry. It's actually Thursday night. We're gonna let it dry overnight tonight and tomorrow while I'm at work. We'll come back tomorrow afternoon. We will put the lowering blocks on it, the U-bolts, the brake lines, get everything connected, and then we'll put the wheels and tires. We can get this thing back to where it's rolling. So thanks for sticking with me again this long, guys, and it's not much longer. We'll have this thing buttoned up, so stay tuned. Okay guys, what you're going to want to do is remove your caliper bracket from the caliper and put your bolts. They're going to have to go in from the inside. So what we'll do is we'll put our bolts on, put our spacers on, put our caliper bracket on, then we will put our rotor, put a couple of lug nuts on it to tighten it up, hold it firm, and then we'll put our brakes on. I'll time lapse it so you can see how it all goes together. Tighten these, by the way, 20 foot-pounds. Okay, sorry for running a little long, but we're finally finished. I did a few things off camera. Let's take a tour of the rear end. I got a question at the end for you guys I'd like to get your opinion on, and we'll end out the video. So, we started out, we got the cow tracks. I put those on, I didn't show that in the video. We've got the disc brakes on, U-bolts, everything. Calvert recommends 65 to 70 foot-pounds. I may have already said that in the video, but I just wanted to reiterate that so you got it. We painted the center section with Rust-Oleum hammer paint, hammered finish paint. It looks aluminum. I wasn't going for an aluminum look. I just wanted something different than black. Didn't want a lot of black on here. So in looking at the rear end, what I wanted to show you guys, you can see my brake setup, how I did it. That is a 9-inch line right there from Russell. It is DOT approved. You can see my fitting setup with the keeper, and I welded some tabs on here that those fit through. And again, you guys know I'll leave you the parts in the description below. I used a stock rubber hose. I built this bracket here. I've already showed you that. Welded it on, got this bolted on. I made my metal lines. And here, this is where we're going to end out the video. Notice here, this is a 15-inch brake line here. I kind of like the flexibility in having a little more brake line there. Plus, my front brake lines, if you remember, if you've seen the Blazer brake caliper install, I used a 14-inch line there. So if this is a 15, this one would fit right on that caliper. If I needed to keep a spare, I could keep one spare, and I would have one for each side of the rear and one for the front as well. So I think my thought is to go with this. Now, is there anything wrong with this right here? No. It's just a short line. It's got a few bends in it. They're not just kinked or, you know, it's still very flexible. So I'm not really concerned with it. I'd just like to know your opinion. So would you go with the 9-inch or would you go with the 15-inch? And that's it. That's going to end out the video, guys. Appreciate you stopping by. If you like this content, hit the like button. If you want to see more, subscribe, and we'll catch you guys in the next episode.